In an Excel pivot table, you can create calculated fields, and in those refer to other fields in the pivot table. Here we have an order list, and we're going to create a pivot table and see how many orders for each product were placed by each sales rep. We're going to need to count things and see if the number of products for each rep was over 2. So the first step will be to create a pivot table, and then we'll build a calculated field. So to insert the pivot table, I'll just select any cell in this table, and on the Insert tab, click Pivot Table. It's picked up the named table that I have created, and I'm going to put it on an existing sheet. I'll click in here and go to the sheet that I've got set up, click where I want the pivot table, and click OK. So now I have a blank pivot table, and I'm going to put a few fields in here. I'll put in the rep and the product. Then I want to see how many units they sold, so I'll check that box, and the total, the sales amount. And I'd like to be able to see a count of the number of orders. To do that, I'm going to use one of my existing fields. So I've got the date field here, and I know there's a date in every record, so I can use that to count. So I'll drag that into the values area, and it shows as a count of dates. So now I can see that there were 3 orders for binders for the rep Andrews. Now I'd like to create a calculated field that shows a 1 or a 0. A 1 means true and a 0 means false. And just check this count and see if it's greater than 2. To do that, I'm going to select a cell in the pivot table, and under Pivot Table Tools, I'll click Analyze, then Fields, Items and Sets, and Calculated Field. I'm going to type a name for this field, and I'll call this Count A. I can enter a formula here, and all I want is a simple formula that checks the date. So I'll double click it, then I'll type greater than, and the number 2. So that's my very simple calculated field. So it should put a 1 for any row where the count of orders, here using count of date, is greater than 2. So I'll click OK. Now because I was using a date field, it's put that in date format. So I'll right click, Value Field Settings, and for this I'll click Number Format, and I'll just use General, and click OK. And now we have 1s, but it's showing a 1 everywhere. Even though there's a 1 here, I've asked it to show true, or a 1 if it's greater than 2, but it's showing a 1 for everything. The reason for that is that a calculated field always uses a sum. Even if I have a field in here that's shown as a date, it ignores that and uses the sum. And every date in Excel is a serial number. So right now the date might be 42,000 and something. So it doesn't take much to add up to be greater than 2. So that's why we're seeing a 1, because the sum of every date here, whether it's just one order or several, that serial number is going to add up to something much bigger than a 2. To solve this problem, we're going to have to add a field to the orders table. So I'll go up to where the headings are. I'll move this over. I'm going to put in a new column here, and I'm going to call this Orders. This is a named table, so it just automatically expanded the table to include the new column. And I want to put a 1 in this column for every row. I'm just going to be able to use that then to count things. It will sum up all the 1s and give me a correct count. So instead of typing a 1 and then having to fill that down and always remember to type a 1 in each new record, because this is a table, I can use a formula. So I'll just type equals 1 and press enter. It then fills it down. It puts that same formula in every row, and it will automatically add that to new rows. So it's a very quick and efficient way to get a counter field. So every row here is one order. And I'll be able to then use a sum of this field to get the correct count and use it in a calculated field. I'll go back to my calculated field, and I'm going to take out this count A because it's incorrect. So I'll remove the check mark from that, and now we can still see the count of date. Now before I can use the new orders field, I have to refresh the pivot table so that it will show up in the list over here. Right now I can't see it. So I'll right click and refresh, and now there's our new orders field. So now I'll build the calculated field. I've clicked a cell in the pivot table. Under Pivot Table Tools, click Analyze, Fields, Items and Sets, Calculated Field. I'll call this Count B, and our formula is going to be equal. Then I'll find our new orders field and double click that. That puts it in our formula. Then greater than 2. I'll click OK. And now we have our count B. It's showing as a sum. I didn't have to put that orders field into the pivot table in order to use that in our calculated field. As long as it's in the source data, it can be used. So now we can see that there's a 0 here because this is not greater than 2 and this is not greater than 2. So we're getting the correct results. I can now take this count of date out as well. So I'll scroll up and remove its check mark, and I could put the orders field in. So now we can see our test, which is our calculated field. I can change the heading of this so it's a little more clear. I'll just change the heading to greater than 2. And for orders, I can change the heading here just to make this a bit narrower. I'll type the word orders and a space character because I can't use orders, which is the exact match for a field name. So orders and space. And now I could make these columns a little bit narrower. So now we have a pivot table with a calculated field that is using a sum of a counter field, so we get correct results. It's not going to work if we try to use another field that is just displayed as a count. For more Excel tips and tutorials, and to download the sample file for this video, please visit my Contextures website at www.contextures.com.